Good evening, and welcome. Tonight, we step inside the rusted gates of forgotten factories, echoing halls where time has stopped, and shadows remember what people wish to forget. These stories are unsettling, haunting, and maybe far too close to reality. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Drop it in the comments below. And if these nightly chills keep you coming back, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. A new horror story waits for you here every single day. Everyone in my town has a story about the factory on the edge of the river. The grown-ups called it the Ridgeway plant, but to us kids, it was just the dare. If you wanted to prove you weren't a coward, you had to go down into the boiler room at night and stay there for at least 5 minutes. I was 16 when my friends finally pushed me into it. It was October, cold enough that our breath fogged in the air as we passed around a cheap flashlight. The factory itself was a hulking shadow against the moon. Windows shattered, brickwork crumbling, the smokestack leaning like it might collapse at any second. 5 minutes, Tyler said, smirking. He was the oldest, the kind of kid who liked watching others squirm. That's all you gotta do. Sit in the boiler room. Easy. Easy for you to say, I muttered, trying not to let my voice shake. Kayla shoved the flashlight into my chest. Just don't chicken out like Derek did last year. Derek had sworn he heard voices down there. He ran out screaming and never lived it down. So yeah. My pride was on the line. The stairs leading down to the basement groaned under my weight. The smell hit me first. Damp concrete, mildew. Something sharp underneath, like burnt oil. The flashlight beam cut through thick shadows, catching rusted pipes and graffiti scrawled across the walls. When I reached the boiler room, I half expected it to be empty. Just a big, dead furnace and nothing else. But it wasn't empty. The boiler itself squatted in the center, massive and round, its rusted door hanging open. The walls sweated with condensation, and puddles covered the floor. My footsteps echoed too loud, like there were more of me walking than just one. I sat on a cracked plastic chair, gripping the flashlight tight. My phone timer was set for 5 minutes. The first 60 seconds dragged like hours. I kept telling myself, it's just an old building. It's just pipes and echoes. Then I heard it. A whisper. Soft. Like someone leaning close to my ear. I jerked the flashlight around, heart hammering, but there was no one there. Just the rusted door of the boiler, yawning open like a mouth. The whisper came again, this time clearer. Cold down here, isn't it? I nearly dropped the light. My timer said only 2 minutes had passed. I told myself it was Tyler or Kayla messing with me. The sound carried weird in basements, right? Maybe they'd found a vent. But then the flashlight flickered. Just once. And in that moment of dimness, I saw movement in the corner. Not Tyler, not Kayla. Something crouched low, pale against the dark, its limbs too long for its body. It shifted toward me with a scraping sound, like wet cloth dragging on concrete. The flashlight steadied again, and it was gone. I wanted to bolt right then, but I forced myself to stay. Pride is a stupid thing. I thought if I ran, I'd be the next Derek. So I sat, gripping the chair until my knuckles hurt, listening to the whispers circle the room. My timer ticked down. 4 minutes, 4.5. At exactly 5 minutes, the whispers stopped. The air went dead still. And then, from inside the boiler, came a single knock. Deep, metallic. Like something was answering back. I didn't wait around this time. I sprinted up the stairs, flashlight bouncing wildly, my friends' laughter echoing as I burst into the night air, gasping. They thought I'd made it. They thought I'd beaten the dare. But I couldn't stop thinking about that knock, like something in the boiler knew I was there, and wanted me to come back. For a while, I didn't tell anyone about the knock. My friends already thought I was jumpy, and if I admitted I'd heard something, they would have torn me apart. So I laughed it off, played it cool, acted like I'd proved myself. But the truth is, I couldn't shake it. That sound followed me. At night, lying in bed, I'd swear I heard it again, dull, metallic, reverberating through the walls. Once, I woke up to find my radiator rattling like someone had struck it with a fist. I told myself it was just old pipes, just my imagination. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. 2 weeks later, Kayla brought it up again. "Bet you won't go back," she teased, smirking at me across the cafeteria table. I tried to laugh. "Why the hell would I?" Tyler chimed in. "Because 5 minutes isn't enough. Everyone knows the real dare is 10. The way he said it made my stomach twist, like he wasn't joking. Like he knew something I didn't. That night, I dreamt about the boiler room. In the dream, I sat in the chair again, flashlight on my lap. The timer ticked, but the numbers went backwards, counting down from hours instead of minutes. And all around me, in the shadows, something breathed. When I woke up, my window was open. I never left it open. The next day, I told myself I'd go back, just to prove it was all in my head. If I could sit in that boiler room again and hear nothing, then maybe I could sleep. I didn't tell Tyler or Kayla this time. I went alone. The factory felt heavier without them, the air thicker, colder. My flashlight cut across walls dripping with condensation, shadows stretching too long, like they wanted to follow me. When I reached the boiler room, I stopped dead. The chair was gone. In its place, right in front of the boiler, was a small pile of objects. My flashlight beam caught them one by one: a marble, a toy car, a pair of glasses. Offerings. That's what it looked like. I crouched down, my skin crawling. The glasses were cracked, the frame bent. The toy car was rusted, the marble was smooth, cloudy, like it had been handled 1,000 times. I don't know why I did it, but I reached out and touched the glasses. They were warm. That's when the whispers started again. Not faint this time. Loud. Dozens of voices overlapping, crowding my ears. Some were high, some low, some so guttural I felt them in my chest. I dropped the glasses and clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside me. "Stay," they whispered. "Stay, stay, stay." I staggered back, my light swinging wildly, landing on the boiler door. It wasn't hanging open anymore. It was shut tight, and something was knocking from the inside. Once, twice, 3 times. I couldn't move. My feet felt nailed to the floor. The knocks grew louder, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The pile of objects rattled, shifting like they were alive. Finally, I bolted. I tore up the stairs, my breath burning, my chest tight. When I burst outside, the night air felt like ice on my skin. I bent over, gasping, swearing I'd never go back again. But here's the thing. The next morning, when I checked my backpack, I found the marble. I never touched it. Never took it. But it's sitting on my dresser right now as I write this. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear it rolling across the wood, all on its own. I tried to get rid of the marble. God knows I did. The first time, I tossed it into the river. I watched it sink under the dark water, felt a wave of relief. But the next morning, it was back on my dresser. Same cloudy swirl inside, same faint warmth when I picked it up. I smashed it with a hammer. The shards scattered across the floor. By nightfall, it was whole again, sitting in my pocket. I don't even remember putting it there. That was when the dreams got worse. I'd wake up standing in my hallway, barefoot, the marble clutched tight in my hand. I'd wake to the sound of knocking, on my walls, on the inside of my closet door, on the goddamn pipes in the kitchen. Always in sets of 3. Kayla noticed I was different. She joked less around me, gave me these sidelong looks. One afternoon, she cornered me outside school. "You went back, didn't you?" she asked. Her voice wasn't teasing this time. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. She just shook her head. "My brother, He went down there years ago. Same thing happened. The marble showed up. Her throat caught. He doesn't live here anymore. I asked her what she meant, but she wouldn't say. Just walked away, muttering, "Don't let it keep you." That night, I decided I had to end it. I went back to the factory one last time. The marble burned hot in my pocket, like it wanted to be there. The halls were quieter than I'd ever heard them, the kind of quiet that presses against your skull. When I reached the boiler room, I froze. The chair was back, sitting exactly where I'd left it that first night. And on the seat was a neat pile of objects, not just random things this time, things I recognized. Tyler's baseball cap, Kayla's hair tie, a notebook with my own handwriting inside. My skin crawled. The boiler door creaked open. Darkness yawned inside, thick and absolute, and from that darkness came the whispers. "Stay," they hissed. "Stay, stay, stay." I pulled out the marble. It was glowing faintly now, pale white, pulsing like a heartbeat. I raised my arm, ready to throw it into the dark, but I didn't. My hand wouldn't move. My fingers clenched tight, holding it like it belonged to me, like I belonged to it. The voices grew louder, crashing into my skull, filling every corner of my mind. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, screaming, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, the boiler room was empty. No chair, no objects, no whispers, just rust and shadows. The marble was gone. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. No dreams, no knocks, no voices. So maybe it's over. Maybe it really was just my imagination. Just the power of suggestion. Just a scared kid freaking himself out. But sometimes when the house is quiet, I swear I hear it again. 3 knocks, slow, measured, coming from inside the walls. And I can't help but wonder, did I escape the dare? Or did I just pass it on to someone else? I don't talk much about that winter. Mostly because people don't want to hear it. They want the sanitized version. Soup kitchens, donated coats, a warm cot at a church basement. They don't want the truth about what happens when you've got nowhere left to go, when every door is locked and you're freezing to death in the alleys. That's how I ended up in the old bottling plant. The place had been abandoned for decades. Broken windows, rusted conveyor belts, shattered bottles crunching underfoot. Most folks said it wasn't safe to squat there. Too many holes in the floor, too many rats. But I didn't have a choice. It was January. My breath fogged the air like smoke, and my fingers were already numb. If I didn't find shelter that night, I might not wake up at all. The first night, it almost felt welcoming. The building cut the wind, and there were corners where the drafts didn't reach. I made a bed out of cardboard and old insulation. Rats scurried through the walls, but they kept their distance. I actually slept. When I woke up, my blanket was folded. Neatly, like someone had tucked it around me. I thought maybe I'd done it in my sleep, though I've never been the neat type. I shrugged it off. But then it kept happening. Every night, I'd leave my meager belongings in a pile, jacket, shoes, food wrappers, and every morning they'd be arranged. My shoes side by side, laces tied, my jacket draped over a rusted chair like it was waiting for me. Even my trash would be gathered into a neat stack, like someone was cleaning up after me. I started to wonder if I wasn't alone in the factory. That thought should have scared me, but at the time it didn't. I figured maybe another guy like me was crashing there, keeping to himself. Maybe he thought he was being polite. I even whispered thanks one morning, feeling stupid as hell, like I was talking to a ghost. That night, I heard the humming. Soft at first. A low tune drifting through the empty halls. No words, just a melody. It came from somewhere deep in the plant, down past the bottling line where the shadows stretched longest. I should have left. God knows I should have. But I followed it instead. The sound led me to a narrow stairwell, the kind workers probably used back when the factory still ran. My flashlight flickered as I stepped down, the humming growing louder. It wasn't a man's voice. Too high, too soft, like a woman singing to herself. At the bottom, there was a storage room. Rusted racks lined the walls, bottles still stacked in crates. The humming stopped as soon as I opened the door. The air smelled sweet, like syrup. I swept my light across the room and froze. Someone had made a bed there. Not like mine. This was meticulous. Layers of blankets smoothed flat. A little collection of things laid out neatly on a crate. Bottle caps, marbles, shiny bits of glass. And in the dust at my feet, fresh footprints. Bare. Small. I backed out, heart pounding, telling myself maybe it was a runaway kid, maybe someone more desperate than me. But deep down, I knew better. The footprints hadn't led into the room. They led out, back up the stairs, toward where I'd been sleeping. That night, I didn't close my eyes. I lay awake in the dark, listening. And just before dawn, I felt it. Light fingers brushing my hair, smoothing it back, like a mother tucking in her child. Only, when I forced my eyes open, no one was there, and the humming had started again. By the third night, I stopped pretending it was my imagination. Something was in that factory with me. Something that didn't want me gone, but didn't want me safe either. The cleaning up continued. My food wrappers stacked, my blanket folded. Once, I woke to find my shoes not just lined up, but polished. Polished. With what? I don't know. But the scuffed leather shone in the moonlight. The humming never stopped. Sometimes it came from the far end of the bottling floor, faint and echoing. Other times it was right behind the walls where I lay, soft as a lullaby. I tried to talk to it. God help me. I actually whispered into the shadows. Who are you? Why are you here? My voice shook like I was begging. The humming paused, and for a heartbeat I thought I'd get an answer. Instead, the sound of glass shattered somewhere in the distance, like a bottle dropped. Then silence. I didn't ask again. Miguel, another guy who drifted around town, sometimes bunking under the bridge, came by one night. I told him the factory was warmer than the streets, that we could share it. He laughed when I warned him about the humming, about the neat little arrangements of my things. Man, you've been breathing mold too long, he said, smirking as he tossed down his bedroll. Ain't no ghost in here, just rats playing house. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. That night, we lay side by side on the bottling floor, the air freezing, our breath curling in pale clouds. Around 2 a.m., the humming started. Miguel sat up. The hell is that? I told you, I whispered. My heart was in my throat. The humming grew louder. This time, there were words woven into it, soft, crooning, too faint to understand. But it wasn't nonsense. It was a song. Miguel grabbed his flashlight and swept it around. The beam cut across the shattered conveyor belts, the racks of bottles, the empty windows. Nothing, just shadows. Then his light hit the far wall and froze. Someone was standing there, at least it looked like someone. A shape, pale against the dark, small, like a child. For a second, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then it moved. One step forward, bare feet silent against the concrete. Miguel swore, stumbling back. Hey! Who the hell are you? The figure tilted its head. The humming stopped, and then every single bottle in that room, hundreds of them stacked on racks, shook all at once. Glass rattled so hard it sounded like a storm of marbles. A few toppled, shattering across the floor. Miguel bolted. He grabbed his pack and ran straight for the exit, his footsteps echoing into the night. I stayed frozen, couldn't move. The figure turned toward me. It stepped closer, close enough for the beam of my lamp to catch its face. Only, it didn't have one. Not a blank void, not a skull. Just skin, stretched smooth where eyes and mouth should be. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. It reached toward me with one pale hand, fingers long, almost too long. They brushed against my cheek, cold and damp. Then it crouched, head tilting like it was studying me. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The bottles stopped rattling. The humming faded. I lay there for the rest of the night, trembling, clutching my blanket like a child. Miguel never came back, and I had the sickening feeling I knew why. I didn't see Miguel for 3 days after he bolted. I searched the bridge, the soup kitchen, even the gas station he used to hang around. Nobody had seen him. Nobody cared, either. That's the thing about people like us. You disappear, and the world keeps turning. On the 4th night, I finally saw him again. I was back at the bottling plant, trying to convince myself it was just shelter. Nothing more. I'd piled extra insulation around me, trying to get warm. The humming had started again, but I tried to block it out, stuffing cloth in my ears. It didn't help. The sound came through anyway, like it was inside my skull. That's when I heard footsteps, bare feet slapping softly against concrete. My whole body went cold. I forced myself to look up, expecting that faceless thing again. Instead, it was Miguel. He stood at the edge of the room, swaying slightly, his clothes torn and damp. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes, Christ, his eyes weren't right. They were cloudy, unfocused, like he was blind. "Miguel?" I croaked. He didn't answer. Just stood there, head tilting from side to side, like he was listening to some music I couldn't hear. I scrambled to my feet, reaching for him. "Man, what happened? Where have you been?" He opened his mouth. At first, I thought he was going to speak. Instead, a low humming poured out. The same lullaby I'd heard night after night. Only now it was coming from him, his lips barely moving. The sound vibrating in his chest. I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No, no, no, no!" His hand shot out, faster than I thought possible, grabbing my wrist. His grip was icy, fingers digging into my flesh. He pulled me toward him closer until his face was inches from mine. Behind him, in the shadows, I saw it. The faceless thing. The small figure watching, its head tilted in the same way Miguel's was. I realized then, it hadn't wanted me. It had wanted him, and it had taken him. Somehow, I wrenched free. I don't even remember how. One moment Miguel's hand was locked around me, the next I was sprinting through the factory, glass crunching beneath my boots. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping in the freezing air, tears streaming down my face. I never went back. A week later, they found Miguel's body. At least, that's what they said it was. Some kids exploring the plant stumbled on him in the storage room. Only, it wasn't really him anymore. They said his skin was stretched tight, like wax. His face smooth, featureless, like someone had erased it. They ruled it exposure, said he froze to death. Nobody questioned it. But I know the truth. I survived. But Miguel didn't. And every night when I close my eyes, I hear him. That humming, that same sick lullaby, vibrating in my bones. Sometimes I wonder if he blames me. If I should have stopped him from running. If I should have gone after him that night. But I didn't. I saved myself. And because of that, Miguel's gone. So if you ever find yourself desperate enough to sleep in an abandoned factory, take my advice. Leave your things in a mess. Don't let it tidy up after you. Don't follow the humming, because once it takes one of you, it won't stop. And it always comes back for the survivor. I never believed in ghosts. Honestly, I still don't, not in the Hollywood sense. But something happened to me when I was working nights at Harrow Steel that I can't explain. I've told myself 100 times that I imagined it, that I was overtired, that my brain was just filling in the gaps. But then I remember the sound of the footsteps behind me, the way the shadows bent around corners that should have been empty. and I know it wasn't just my imagination. Harrow Steel had been closed since the late 90s. It used to be the beating heart of a small Midwestern town, employing half the people there until everything got shipped overseas. What was left was a skeleton of a plant, mile-long halls with broken windows, rusted cranes dangling overhead like the ribs of some giant carcass. The property still belonged to a holding company that couldn't sell it, so they hired a skeleton crew of guards to keep vandals out. That's how I ended up there. I was 27 at the time, newly divorced, living paycheck to paycheck. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was easy money. Walk the rounds, log the checkpoints, make sure nobody was breaking in to strip copper. Most nights, it was dead silent except for rats and the occasional raccoon knocking something over. The first few shifts felt almost peaceful, the kind of quiet you don't get in town. My boots echoed on the catwalks, and my flashlight beam caught dust hanging in the air like snow. Sometimes I'd stop and just listen. Nothing but the creak of old steel and the drip of water from busted pipes. But about a week in, things started to feel off. It was little stuff at first. One night, I heard the sound of a whistle. Not a sharp police whistle, but the kind you'd use to signal the start of a shift. 3 short blasts, far away. I knew it instantly, because my dad used to work at Harrow, and he told me how the foreman's whistle was the sound that ruled their lives. But Harrow had been silent for decades. There was no one left to blow that whistle. I told myself it was the wind. That was the easiest explanation. But then the motion sensors started acting up. There were these little gray boxes bolted to the walls that tripped if someone walked by. Every time one went off, it sent a beep to my handheld monitor. Usually it was nothing, just a mouse scurrying by or sometimes the sensors themselves glitching. But on the 3rd week, the East Corridor sensors began to light up in sequence. 1, then 2, then 3, like someone was walking down the hall. I hurried over, flashlight cutting through the dark. My boots echoed, my breath fogged in the cold air. But the corridor was empty. The dust on the floor was untouched. I thought maybe the wiring was bad. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. That night, while doing my log in the old break room, I felt something shift in the corner of my vision. The windows were shattered, letting in pale moonlight. The broken vending machine stood against the wall like it had for 20 years. And in the glass of the soda machine, I swear I saw a shadow standing behind me. I spun around so fast my flashlight clattered to the floor. No one was there. The room was empty. Just me, the rust, and the silence. But when I picked the light back up, the shadow in the glass didn't disappear. That was the first time I realized I wasn't alone in Harrow Steel. After that night in the break room, I started second-guessing everything. Every reflection, every shadow, every flicker of light in the corner of my eye. I told myself I was just tired. That graveyard shifts mess with your head. But the more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. The next week, my supervisor asked if I'd noticed the sensors going off. He said the control system kept logging movement in the East Wing between midnight and 3 a.m. He looked at me like maybe I was the one triggering them. I didn't have the guts to tell him what I'd really seen, so I just shrugged and said, maybe it was the wiring. That night, I decided to test it. I walked the East Wing right around midnight. My flashlight beam swung across rows of rusted machines, hydraulic presses, conveyor belts frozen in place, catwalks sagging under their own weight. Dust coated everything like a second skin. I kept my monitor in my hand, waiting for the little beep. At 12:17, it went off. The East Corridor sensor blinked red. I froze, scanning the hallway. My light reached the end of the corridor, but there was nothing. Just darkness, pipes dripping water into a puddle, and the faint groan of shifting metal. Then the second sensor tripped. I could hear it that time, the faint scuff of a boot sole dragging across concrete. I swung my light, half expecting some copper thief crouched in the shadows. But the beam cut across empty air. My heart was hammering so loud I swear it echoed. I started walking forward, slow, the way you'd approach a stray dog you weren't sure was friendly. Third sensor. Beep. Something was walking toward me, step by step. I kept moving forward until I reached the middle of the hall. Then I realized if it kept moving at that pace, whatever it was should be standing right in front of me. But there was nothing. Just a long strip of dust on the floor, completely untouched. That's when the whistle blew again. It wasn't faint this time. It was sharp, piercing, and it came from right behind me. 3 blasts, just like my dad had described all those years ago. My blood went cold. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. Nobody was there. The hallway stretched back into shadow, empty as the grave. But I swear on my life, I felt warm air brush across the back of my neck, like someone had leaned in close enough to breathe on me. I bolted. My boots slammed against the concrete as I sprinted out of the east wing, past the catwalks, past the dark windows, until I burst out into the yard, gasping like I'd run a marathon. I stood there in the freezing night air, trying to steady myself. When I finally calmed down enough to look back, I realized something terrifying. There was a figure standing in the window of the east wing. It wasn't clear, just a silhouette, darker than the shadows around it. But it was tall, broad-shouldered, like a foreman or a worker. It didn't move. It just watched me. I stared at it for maybe 30 seconds, too scared to even blink. Then the lights inside flickered, just once, like a dying bulb, and when they steadied again, the figure was gone. I didn't tell my supervisor. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A divorced night guard at an empty steel plant saying ghosts were setting off the sensors. No, I kept it to myself, but I started carrying my dad's old whistle in my pocket after that. Not sure why. Maybe I thought it would protect me. Maybe I thought it would answer back if the thing ever blew again. I still don't know what I expected. All I know is, 2 nights later, I heard the footsteps following me again. By the time that 3rd week rolled around, I was running on fumes. I barely slept during the day anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the window. Worse than that, I started hearing things when I wasn't even at work. Lying in bed at home, I'd swear I heard steel doors clanging shut somewhere in the distance. Sometimes in the shower, I'd catch the echo of boots walking across catwalks above me. And once, God help me, I thought I heard the whistle again, faint but unmistakable, drifting in through the cracked window of my apartment. I thought about quitting, but I needed the money, and some sick part of me wanted answers. I had to know if I was losing my mind or if something really lingered in Harrow steel. That Friday, I brought a small audio recorder with me. Nothing fancy, just one of those handheld things journalists use for interviews. My plan was simple. Walk the east wing, let the sensors trip, and see if the recorder picked up anything. Midnight came, and sure enough, the beeping started. First sensor, second, third. The air felt thick, almost heavy, like the whole building was pressing down on me. I clicked on the recorder and whispered into it. Testing, East Corridor. If anyone's here, say something. That's when I heard it. A voice, low, ragged, carried on the draft that blew down the hall. Just 2 words. Shift change. I froze. My stomach lurched like I'd stepped off a cliff. I didn't even play it back. I knew what I'd heard wasn't just in my head. The footsteps started again, slow, deliberate, one after another. I backed up, flashlight trembling in my hand, until my spine pressed against the cold steel wall. Then, out of the darkness, I saw movement. Not a full figure this time. Just shadows. Long, stretched-out shadows that didn't match mine. They slid along the walls, bending around corners in ways that made no sense. And then, I swear this is true, they began to multiply. One shadow, then 3, then 5. Tall, hulking outlines that looked like workers marching in formation. Boots hitting the floor in perfect unison. The sound was deafening, like a phantom army on the march. I raised the recorder again, whispering, "Who are you? What do you want?" For a few seconds, nothing. Just the pounding rhythm of those boots. Then the answer came, in a dozen overlapping voices, so close I thought they were inside my skull. "We're still here." I don't remember running, but I must have. My next clear memory is standing outside the plant, my hands scraped raw from slamming open the rusted door, lungs burning. I never went back. I called my supervisor the next day and told him I quit. He didn't ask why. But here's the thing. Leaving didn't fix anything. The shadows followed me. I see them at night, sliding across my bedroom walls even when the lights are off. The whistle blows outside my apartment, sharp and clear, at exactly 12:17 a.m. The same time those sensors tripped. And sometimes, God help me, I wake up and feel hot breath on the back of my neck. I'm typing this now with every light in my place turned on, but it doesn't matter. I can hear the boots in the hallway outside, slow, getting closer. If you ever get offered a job at Harrow Steel, don't take it. Because once you walk those halls, they don't let you leave. And I think tonight, they're finally coming in. I've been in demolition for 12 years, and I've seen some messed up places. Asbestos-choked schools, basements full of black mold, houses so rotten they collapsed while we were still inside. But nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what I saw at the old glassworks factory. We'd been contracted to gut the building before a developer turned the site into storage units. The factory had been sitting dead since the 60s, back when the town's glass business dried up. Most of it was what you'd expect. Rusted machines, shattered panes, piles of broken bottles crunching under your boots. But in the back of the building, we found a stairwell that wasn't on the blueprints. It was tucked behind a wall of crumbling brick, like somebody had tried to seal it off. My boss thought it was just an old access stair, maybe leading down to storage. He told me to check it out while the others finished stripping wiring. The first thing I noticed was how new it felt. The steps weren't crumbling concrete like the rest of the building. They were stone, smooth, solid, barely chipped. No graffiti, no dust, like they'd been carved yesterday. I clicked on my headlamp and started down. At first I figured it was just one extra level. The stairs wound tight, the air growing colder the deeper I went. My boots echoed, sharp against the stone, the sound bouncing back at me like I wasn't alone. After maybe 2 minutes, I realized something was wrong. I should have hit the basement by then. The whole factory wasn't more than 3 stories tall, but the stairs kept going. Down and down and down, the spiral never ending. My chest tightened, my legs aching, but I couldn't bring myself to turn back. Every few flights, I'd stop and press my hand to the wall. It was damp, slick with condensation, like the stone itself was sweating. I swear I felt a pulse under my palm, a slow, steady throb. I shook it off, telling myself I was imagining things, just echoes, just nerves. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. They came from below, slow, heavy, too far to see, but close enough to hear. I froze, headlamp beam cutting through the spiral, nothing but darkness. "Hello?" I called down, my voice echoing. The footsteps stopped. My skin crawled. I turned to head back up, but the stairs above me looked wrong. They didn't curve the way they should. They stretched upward, higher and higher, disappearing into blackness. It hit me then. I had no idea how far I'd come down. 10 minutes? 20? My watch said I'd been on those stairs for nearly half an hour. That wasn't possible. The air grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me, and somewhere below, the footsteps started again. This time, they were faster. I bolted up the stairs, boots slamming against stone, lungs burning. I didn't care how far I had to go. I just needed out. But no matter how high I climbed, the top never came. I swear the stairs shifted under me, the spiral twisting, lengthening, dragging me deeper. My headlamp flickered, shadows dancing on the walls, and just before the light died completely, I saw something. A figure, half a flight below me, pale hands gripping the rail, face hidden in the dark, and it was smiling. I don't know how long I stared at that thing on the stairs. My headlamp sputtered, shadows cutting across its face, so I could only make out the curve of its grin, the pale flash of teeth. Then the light died. Darkness swallowed everything. I fumbled for my backup flashlight, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. When the beam finally cut through the dark, the figure was gone. Just stone steps spiraling endlessly both up and down. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. The air was thin down there, stale and damp, messing with my head. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were handprints on the wall. Hundreds of them, pale smears pressed into the stone, some fresh, some faded. They stretched upward as far as my light could reach, downward into the abyss below. Big ones, small ones. Some with long, finger-like smudges that didn't look human at all. My chest tightened. I kept climbing, desperate to find the exit, but the stairs never ended. My calves burned, my throat dry, sweat stinging my eyes. And then I heard it again. The footsteps. But this time they weren't below. They were above me, slow, heavy, coming down the stairs. I froze, my flashlight beam trembling against the wall. I couldn't see anything, but the sound was getting closer. My mind raced. If I went down, I'd run into whatever I'd heard before. If I went up, I'd meet whoever, or whatever, was coming down. I pressed myself against the wall, shaking, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." And then the whispering started. Voices, dozens of them, overlapping, echoing in the stone. Some were low, guttural, others high, almost childlike. They weren't speaking words I recognized, but the cadence was unmistakable. They were calling roll, like a list being read off in a language I couldn't understand. The footsteps above stopped. The ones below stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. My flashlight flickered again, and in that split second of dimness, I saw shapes. Figures lined along the railings, stretching both up and down. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Their bodies leaned toward me, faces blurred, grins stretched too wide. When the light steadied, the stairs were empty again. That was it. I broke. I bolted downward, lungs heaving, my boots hammering the stone. I didn't care where it led anymore. Up was hopeless. Maybe down would end eventually. Maybe there was a bottom. Minutes blurred into hours. My watch ticked past midnight, but the stairs just kept going. My legs screamed with every step. My flashlight battery drained, the beam shrinking, until it was barely aglow. And then I smelled it. Smoke, thick, choking smoke, drifting upward from below. My eyes watered, my throat burned, but I kept going. The air shimmered with heat, the walls damp with condensation that now ran red, like blood trickling from unseen cracks. Finally, I saw it, an opening at the bottom of the stairs. I stumbled toward it, my chest ready to burst. The smoke thickened, the heat unbearable. And when I stepped through the archway, I realized I hadn't reached the basement. I was back in the boiler room of the factory, same cracked floor. Same rusted machines, only it wasn't empty this time. Every one of my co-workers was there. Men I'd known for years, standing shoulder to shoulder in neat rows, staring at me with hollow eyes. Their skin was gray, their lips cracked, their hard hats melted into their skulls, and behind them, at the far end of the room, the figure from the stairs stood waiting, still smiling. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My co-workers, men I'd had beers with after shifts, men I'd seen laugh, argue, curse, stood lined up in the boiler room, gray-skinned and silent, like mannequins waiting for a command. I stumbled forward, coughing through the thick smoke. Ralph? Eddie? Jesus, what? None of them answered. Their eyes stayed locked on me, lifeless, unblinking. Their lips began to curl upward, slowly, until every single one of them wore the same awful grin. The figure at the far end stepped forward, pale, stretched too tall, arms too long. Its smile was wide enough to split its face. I realized with a lurch that it wasn't just smiling, it was mocking me. My flashlight gave one final flicker and died. Darkness slammed down like a lid. The only light came from faint red veins glowing in the walls, pulsing like the factory itself was alive. In that glow, I saw the figure raise its hand and point toward the stairs behind me. The voices started again. Hundreds of them, layered and overlapping, a roll call in that guttural, alien language. With each name spoken, one of my coworkers stepped forward. Their boots pounded the floor in unison, shaking the room. "Stop!" I screamed, swinging my crowbar wildly. It clanged uselessly against rusted steel. "Stay the hell away from me!" But they didn't stop. They marched, closer and closer, until I could feel the heat radiating off their gray skin, smell the stench of burned flesh. Their eyes bore into me, hollow pits that pulled at something deep inside my skull. I turned to run, but the stairs weren't there anymore. The archway behind me was gone, replaced by more rows of figures pressing in, blocking every exit. The figure with the grin moved closer, its pale feet silent against the floor. It leaned down until its face was inches from mine. Its breath was hot, foul, like rotting meat. "Your turn," it whispered. Its hand pressed against my chest, and in that instant, something tore free inside me. My breath hitched, my vision blurred. I looked down and saw my own skin paling, cracking, turning gray. My crowbar slipped from my weakening fingers, clattering to the floor. The voices rose into a deafening chorus. My name was in there now, woven into the roll call, over and over, chanted like an order. I dropped to my knees, clutching my chest, screaming until my throat split. My co-workers surrounded me, grins splitting wider, their voices drilling into my skull. The figure's hand pushed harder, and I felt myself unraveling, piece by piece, like my soul was being unstitched. The last thing I remember clearly was my reflection in a puddle on the floor. Not my face. A gray mask. Lips cracked in a grin I couldn't control. And then, nothing. No pain, no fear. Just endless stairs, spiraling down, down, down. My boots marching in time with the rest, my voice adding to the roll call. If you're reading this, it means someone found my notes, maybe the recorder I dropped. Don't go to the glassworks. Don't go near the stairs, because once you step on them, you don't come back. You just keep going down, forever. I've been in the real estate appraisal game for almost 20 years, and I've walked through more dead buildings than I can count. Abandoned schools, burned-out hotels, shuttered malls. Most of them are just sad husks, nothing more. But the paper mill on Brantley Road? That place was different. The assignment was straightforward. Walk the site, note the structural issues, estimate the land value. Developers wanted to know if the property could be gutted and turned into loft apartments. Easy money, usually. The mill had been shut down since '79, when a boiler explosion killed 3 men on the night shift. After that, the place never reopened. The town called it cursed. Kids broke in sometimes, spray painting ghosts on the walls, but otherwise it sat there, decaying. When I arrived, the afternoon was gray and heavy, sky thick with clouds that looked ready to burst. My boots sank into soft mud as I crossed the yard. The brick building rose up in front of me, windows shattered, roof sagging in places. It smelled of wet wood and mildew, the kind of scent you only get from 40 years of rot. I stepped inside, clipboard in hand, flashlight clipped to my belt. Dust coated everything in a thick gray film. Old machinery sat frozen in place, massive rollers, rusted pulping vats, conveyor belts covered in bird droppings. It was quiet. Too quiet. Until I heard the whistle. 3 sharp blasts, echoing through the mill. It stopped me cold. The sound was unmistakable. An old foreman's whistle, the kind used to signal shift changes. My dad had worked in a mill when I was a kid, and I knew that sound like my own heartbeat. But this place hadn't run in decades. I told myself it was my imagination. Sound carries weird in big, empty buildings. Maybe it was wind through a pipe. But then I noticed something stranger. The floor in front of the pulping vats was clean, not spotless, but free of the dust that coated everything else. Like someone had walked there recently. I bent down and touched it. The concrete was warm. I stood quickly, clipboard trembling in my hand. My throat felt tight, my stomach cold. I forced myself to keep going, jotting notes about sagging beams, water damage, graffiti. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Up on the catwalk, I heard the creak of boots, slow, deliberate steps. My eyes darted upward, flashlight beam cutting across rusted railings. Nothing. Just shadows. Then the whistle blew again. This time it was closer, right behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, but the mill was empty. Just rows of dead machines, silent and cold. My legs felt like lead as I forced myself toward the exit. I told myself I'd seen enough, that I had enough to write up a report. But halfway across the floor, I froze, because there, in the dust ahead of me, were fresh footprints, heavy boots, leading toward the boilers at the far end, and from the darkness of that corner, I heard it, breathing, slow, steady, deep, like someone waiting for me to come closer. I backed away, clipboard shaking in my hands, pulse slamming in my ears. I don't even remember leaving the building. 1 second I was staring at those footprints, the next I was outside, gasping in the damp gray air. I told myself I wouldn't go back, that I'd fudge the report, call it too dangerous to redevelop. But later that night, when I was typing up my notes, I heard it again. 3 short blasts, the foreman's whistle, and it came from inside my house. I barely slept that night. Every time I drifted off, I'd jerk awake, certain I heard it again, that sharp, metallic blast echoing through my house. I searched every room, checked every vent, even walked outside into the drizzle at 3 a.m., but there was nothing. Just silence. The next morning, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Stress, too much coffee. Old memories of my dad coming back to haunt me. But as I typed up the appraisal, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The notes on my clipboard weren't mine. My handwriting is messy, slanted, always in blue pen. But these notes, written right over mine, were neat, precise, block letters. They listed times. 12:15, shift begins, 1:30, VAT inspection, 2 all, roll call, roll call. The word made my throat go dry. I slammed the clipboard shut, shoved it in my bag, and decided I was done. No more mills, no more cursed sites. I'd tell the firm it wasn't salvageable and move on, but I couldn't. Because that night, as I sat in my living room with the TV on low, I saw something move across the reflection in the blank screen. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an old mill uniform. A cap pulled low, a whistle on a chain around his neck. I spun around, heart racing. Nobody there. Just the darkened kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator. When I looked back at the screen, the man was gone. I should have called someone then, a priest, a shrink, anyone. But instead, I poured 2 fingers of whiskey, stared at the empty screen, and whispered, "What do you want?" The air shifted. Warmer. Heavier. Like the mill itself was pressing in on me. And then, faint but clear, I heard it. Roll call. 2 words, rasped out in a voice that wasn't mine. The glass in my hand cracked, whiskey spilled across the carpet. I didn't sleep at all after that. By morning, I'd made my decision. If this thing wanted me back at the mill, fine. I'd go. I'd see it through. Better that than waiting for it to come closer, to settle into my home. I packed light, flashlight, crowbar, camera. When I pulled up to the mill, the sky was dark, clouds heavy with rain. The building loomed like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was thicker, hotter. My flashlight beam swept across the floor, catching movement in the shadows. The footprints were back, more of them this time, crisscrossing the dust. And then I heard them. Boots, marching steady, dozens of them, invisible feet pounding across the catwalks, down the halls, circling the vats. A whole shift change, echoing through the dead building. The whistle blew, 3 sharp blasts that shook me to my core, and all at once I saw them. Figures emerging from the dark, men in work uniforms, faces blackened with soot, eyes hollow, lips cracked. They walked in unison, tools in hand, moving past me as if I wasn't even there. Except one, the foreman. He stopped in front of me, boots planted firm, whistle glinting in the flashlight beam. His eyes, if you could call them that, were pits of smoke. "Inspection," he rasped. His voice was like grinding gears. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He raised a hand, pointing toward the boilers, and behind him, the other men turned their heads in unison, waiting. I realized then that it wasn't just a haunting, it was a routine, and I'd just been drafted into it. The foreman's finger stayed leveled at the boilers, steady as a gun barrel. Around him, the workers stared, eyes hollow, waiting for me to move. My legs shook, but somehow I forced myself forward. Each step echoed in the cavernous mill, joining the phantom rhythm of boots that weren't really there. The air grew hotter the closer I got to the boilers, thick with the stink of ash and iron. The vats loomed in front of me, massive cylinders coated in rust, doors warped but still intact. I could hear something inside, a faint pounding like fists striking steel. The hair on my arms rose as I realized it wasn't one set of fists. It was dozens, maybe hundreds. I turned to look back. The foreman stood like a statue, whistle gleaming, workers lined behind him in perfect rows. "Inspection," he growled again. My flashlight beam shook as I aimed it at the nearest vat. My heart pounded so hard I thought my ribs would crack. With trembling fingers, I pulled the crowbar from my bag and wedged it under the door. The metal screamed as it gave way. Heat blasted out, nearly knocking me flat. The smell was unbearable. Burnt hair, old sweat, the stench of rot buried for decades. And inside, I wish I could forget what I saw. Bodies, blackened, charred, twisted together. But they weren't still. Their hands clawed against the steel, their heads jerking, mouths opening in soundless screams. Their eyes, when they caught mine, weren't pleading. They were angry. I staggered back, bile burning my throat. "Why are you showing me this?" I gasped. The foreman stepped closer. His eyes smoldered, his jaw clenched. He raised the whistle to his lips and blew. 3 blasts. The workers surged forward. Boots slammed against the floor in unison, the sound rattling the walls. They advanced like an army, closing in. I stumbled, swinging the crowbar wildly, screaming for them to stay back. And somehow they did. For a heartbeat, they froze. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was desperation. But I raised the crowbar like a weapon and shouted the only word that came to mind. "Roll call!" The foreman's head tilted. Slowly, he lowered the whistle. The workers stopped. For a moment, the mill was silent again, the only sound my ragged breathing. Then, one by one, the workers turned away. They shuffled back into the shadows, boots fading into nothing. The foreman lingered, smoke still curling from his eyes, then finally stepped back, vanishing into the dark. And just like that, I was alone. I ran. I don't remember how I got out, only that I collapsed in the mud outside, gasping like a drowning man. The mill loomed behind me, quiet, lifeless. I quit the appraisal job the next morning, told them I'd seen enough. Wrote up the report as structurally unsalvageable. But here's the thing. I did make it out. I stopped them. I survived. The problem is, I don't think I left empty-handed. The whistle is in my pocket. Not my dad's. Not a replica. His. The foreman's. Cold metal against my thigh, heavy as a shackle. I've tried to throw it away, burn it, break it. But it always comes back. Always. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is still, I feel the urge to lift it to my lips, to blow. 3 sharp blasts, and call them back. I've been scrapping since I was 19. It's not glamorous work, but when you're broke and desperate, you'll climb into any rusted husk if it means pulling out a few pounds of copper. Old factories are the best spots. You'd be amazed how much wiring gets left behind when a place goes under. That's how I ended up at the old textile plant on the edge of town. Everyone called it Carter Dye, though the sign had long since fallen. The building was huge. 3 stories of smashed-out windows and collapsed rafters. Most people saw nothing but rot. I saw dollar signs. It was me, my cousin Ray, and our buddy Miguel. We'd hit places before together. And yeah, it wasn't exactly legal, but we weren't hurting anyone. Just stripping copper and brass, selling it by the pound at the yard. We had bolt cutters, headlamps, and a couple beat-up shopping carts we'd found behind a grocery store. The first night inside went smoothly. The air reeked of mildew and old chemicals, but that's par for the course in places like that. Broken dye vats lined the walls, giant metal tubs, some cracked wide open, others still half full of sludge that looked like melted crayons. We joked about it, calling it monster soup, but one vat stood out. It was intact, covered with a corroded lid that had fused shut. No cracks, no leaks. Ray tapped it with his crowbar, and the echo rolled through the whole building. "That thing's solid," he said. "Bet there's pipes running into it, copper for days." That was enough to get us working. We rigged up a little pump and hose to drain it, figuring even if it was filled with sludge, once it was empty, we could cut into the piping. It took hours, the hose sputtering and groaning as dark liquid trickled out onto the floor. The smell was horrible, like wet rust and something sweeter underneath, almost like rotting fruit. Around midnight, Miguel lit a cigarette and leaned against the vat. "Man, I don't like this," he muttered. "Feels wrong, like we're opening something we shouldn't." Ray laughed. "What, you think there's a ghost in the soup? Relax, it's just chemicals." But I'll be honest with you, Miguel wasn't wrong. I felt it too. The deeper the vat drained, the heavier the air got. My chest felt tight, my skin prickled, and every time I looked into the darkness of that vat, I thought I saw movement. Just little ripples, like something shifting down there. When the liquid finally gurgled down to the bottom, the pump sputtered and died. We pried the lid loose with a crowbar. It screeched as rust gave way, and when it popped free, a burst of air hit us like a punch in the face. It was hot, moist, and stank like something long dead. We all gagged, waving our hands. I shined my headlamp inside. At first I thought it was empty. Just a black pit, the metal walls slick with residue. But then, God, I still get chills. I saw a hand press against the inside wall. Not a skeleton, not rotted, a hand. Pale, slender fingers dragging wet streaks down the steel. Miguel cursed and stumbled back. "Jesus Christ, there's someone in there!" I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, but the smear of 5 dripping lines down the wall was real. I saw them with my own eyes. Then the hand pulled back into the dark. Ray, stupid as ever, leaned over the rim with his flashlight. "Hey, you okay down?" That's when something grabbed him. I only saw it for a split second. Something pale, slick, and fast shot up out of the vat and latched onto Ray's arm. He screamed, thrashing, as his flashlight tumbled to the floor. Miguel and I both froze, too shocked to move. And then, whatever it was, yanked him straight down into the vat. The lid slammed shut on its own with a sound like gunfire. And we were left in the dark, Ray's screams echoing from inside the vat. I'll never forget the sound of Ray's screaming. It wasn't just panic, it was raw, animal terror, the kind of sound a person makes when they know they're already dead. Miguel and I just stood there, paralyzed. My flashlight beam jittered across the floor, catching only twisted shadows and the spilled hose pumping out the last dregs of sludge. I couldn't bring myself to look directly at the vat. Then it went quiet. No more screaming, no more banging. Just silence, broken only by the slow drip, drip, drip of whatever still clung to the inside walls. Miguel finally snapped out of it. He grabbed my jacket and shook me hard. "We gotta get him out," he shouted, eyes wild. His cigarette had burned down to the filter, smoldering between his fingers, forgotten. I nodded, though I didn't believe for a second Ray was still alive. Still, instinct took over. We both rushed the vat, wedging our crowbars under the rim. It didn't make sense. The lid had been rusted in place, fused, solid. It had taken us 20 minutes to get it open before. But now? It was sealed tighter than ever, like the damn thing had grown shut again. We pulled, cursed, hammered, but it wouldn't budge. The metal felt hot beneath my hands, almost pulsing. At one point, I swore I felt it shift, like something was pressing against the other side. Miguel backed off, panting. "This ain't right, man. This ain't natural." I wanted to argue, but my stomach told me he was right. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. And yet, I couldn't. Ray was my cousin. I couldn't just walk away. So I climbed up onto the rim and shined my headlamp down through a crack. What I saw still wakes me up at night. The inside of the vat was moving, not sloshing liquid, moving. Like the walls themselves were rippling, folding inward, pulsing with veins of light that crawled like worms. In the middle, half submerged in the dark sludge, something pale was struggling. Ray's face broke the surface for just a moment, his mouth wide in a silent scream. His eyes were rolled back white. His skin looked like it was already melting into whatever was inside that vat. I almost fell backwards. My chest seized up and my throat closed like I couldn't breathe. That's when the lid slammed up into my chin and sent me tumbling to the floor. My lamp spun away, clattering against broken tiles. Miguel screamed my name. "Move! Move!" The lid rattled, bending upward from inside like something massive was trying to push it open. Metal screeched, bolts snapped, and the whole vat began to shake. We didn't think anymore. We just ran. Our carts, our tools, hell, even my jacket. We left it all behind. Miguel practically shoved me through a busted side door, and we didn't stop running until we were 2 blocks away, lungs burning, our shoes soaked in puddles. We collapsed in an alley. I could still hear the echo of Ray's voice in my ears, even though he hadn't screamed for at least 10 minutes. Miguel sat there, shaking, whispering over and over. "We left him. We left him." I wanted to tell him Ray was already gone before we even had a chance to save him. But the words wouldn't come out. We agreed to never go back, to never talk about it. We told ourselves Ray must have fallen into a shaft or wandered off when we weren't looking, a lie we both knew wouldn't hold. But 2 nights later, I woke up to a sound outside my apartment. It was a tapping, slow, wet, like fingers dragging across metal. And when I looked out my window toward the dark horizon, I swear I could see smoke rising from the direction of Carter Die. Something was still moving inside that vat, and I knew we hadn't sealed it. I couldn't sleep after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ray's face rising out of the sludge, eyes rolled back, mouth open, skin sloughing off like wax. I told myself over and over it wasn't my fault, that there was nothing I could have done, but the guilt settled in my chest like lead. Miguel stopped answering my calls. Can't blame him. The last time I saw him, he looked hollow. He told me he was done scrapping for good, that he was going to find honest work, maybe move out of town. He looked at me like I was cursed, like even talking about what happened might bring it back. But I couldn't let it go. Something inside me needed closure, needed to know what we'd unleashed. So, against every shred of common sense, I went back to Carter Die, alone. The plant looked worse in daylight. Rust eaten through every beam, graffiti covering the walls, glass crunching under my boots. But the vat room was darker than I remembered, the air thicker. It smelled like copper and rot, like the inside of a grave that had been sealed too long. The vat stood in the center, lid buckled, streaked with handprints. Too many handprints. Some small, some large, pressed into the rust as if dozens of people had tried to claw their way out. I climbed up onto the rim, crowbar in hand, heart pounding. The lid was loose this time. Whatever was inside had weakened it. I wedged the crowbar under and pried. It popped open with a hiss of hot air that stank like blood and burnt hair, and inside, I saw them. Not just Ray, not anymore. Dozens of pale shapes tangled together, writhing in the black sludge, faces half-formed, arms reaching up, mouths opening in silent screams. And at the center, towering over them, something vast and skeletal, its ribcage glowing faintly like embers, its hollow eyes locked directly onto me. I almost dropped the crowbar. The voices came all at once. Ray's voice, Miguel's mother's voice, a chorus of people I didn't know. They whispered, begged, screamed, "Join us, join us, join us." My body moved on instinct. I grabbed the loose lid and heaved it down with every ounce of strength I had. The metal clanged shut, cutting off the sound, the movement, the sight of that impossible thing. I jammed the crowbar through the latches, bending them until the metal fused. Then I grabbed chains from the corner of the room, wrapping them around the vat again and again until my hands bled. Finally, I dumped an entire barrel of solvent over the lid and lit a match. The fire roared to life, orange flames licking upward, black smoke filling the ceiling. The vat screamed, not the metal, but what was inside. I heard it thrash, pound, claw. Voices shrieked my name, begged me to stop, cursed me. I stood there until the flames burned low, until the air seared my lungs and my vision swam. Then I stumbled out, coughing, half-blind. By the time I made it back to the street, I could see black smoke pouring from the factory roof, thick and heavy, curling toward the sky. The fire department called it a chemical accident, said the place was too unstable to investigate properly. By morning, Carter Die was nothing but a burned-out husk. I told myself it was over, that I'd killed it, sealed it, destroyed whatever was inside that vat. But sometimes, when the wind's right, I swear I can still smell it. That sweet, rotten fruit stench. And every so often, when I close my eyes, I hear Ray's voice. Not screaming this time, just whispering. You saved yourself, but you left me behind. I stopped the thing. I burned it down. But I'll never stop hearing him. That's the cost of survival. I've explored a lot of abandoned places, hospitals, schools, even an old amusement park once, but Stenton Chemical was the one I should have stayed away from. Every Urbex forum I followed said the same thing. Don't go near it. Some said it was toxic, others said it was guarded, but the most common warning was just, you won't like what you find. That should have been enough. But I was 22, hungry for clout, and desperate to boost my photography portfolio. Abandoned factories look great in black and white. Rust, shadows, broken glass. It's art if you angle it right. So one night, I hopped the fence with my Nikon slung around my neck and a flashlight clipped to my vest. The factory loomed over me like a dead giant. 3 stories of broken windows and sagging beams, the old smokestacks stabbing up into the sky. But as soon as I got closer, I froze. There were lights on, not flickers from squatters or flashlights, actual fluorescence. A pale, buzzing glow seeping out of the office windows on the 2nd floor. I stood there for a full minute, debating whether I should bail. But the photographer in me whispered, This is perfect. Everyone had shots of empty factories. Nobody had shots of one that looked alive. So I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The air reeked of dust and ammonia, the kind of chemical stink that burns your nose. My boots crunched over broken tiles. I snapped a few warm-up shots, the sagging conveyor belts, peeling paint, a rusted safety first sign half buried in rubble. The camera flash lit the place up in harsh bursts, and each time, for just a second, I thought I saw movement in the corners. When I reached the stairwell, I noticed something weird. The steps were clean, not spotless, but clearer than the rest of the building, like someone actually used them. I climbed up to the second floor, and that's when the buzzing hit me. Fluorescent lights, the same kind you'd find in any office building, humming overhead. And they weren't old. They were brand new, shining white, buzzing steady. I crept down the hallway, snapping shots as I went. Cubicles lined the walls, desks stacked with papers, chairs tucked in neatly. It looked like an office frozen in time, except for one thing. Everything was clean, no dust, no cobwebs. I reached out and touched a desk. My finger came back smudged with fresh ink from a still wet pen. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. This place wasn't abandoned, not completely. I pulled my hand back, heart pounding. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but my legs carried me deeper. I couldn't stop. I needed proof, something I could show the forums, something that would set my photos apart. At the end of the hall was a glass-walled boardroom. The lights inside flickered once, then steadied. I raised my camera, zoomed in through the glass. There were people in there, 6 of them, seated around the table. Suits, neat hair. Their heads were bowed like they were studying papers in front of them. I snapped a photo. The shutter clicked too loud in the silence. Every head turned at the same time. Not slowly. Not naturally. All at once. 6 faces, jerking up in perfect unison, eyes locking straight onto me through the glass. I dropped the camera. The lens cracked against the floor, but even without it, I could still see their faces staring at me, and I swear to God, they were smiling. I don't remember bending down to grab my camera, but I must have, because suddenly I was clutching it against my chest like a shield. My heart was hammering so loud I thought the whole damn factory could hear it. The 6 figures at the table didn't move. They just sat there, staring at me through the glass, those unnatural smiles stretched too wide, too perfect. I should have run. Any sane person would have. But I lifted my camera instead. My hands were shaking so bad the lens rattled. I raised it, aimed at them, and snapped a shot. The flash went off, and in that split second they changed. Their faces blurred, smeared across the photo like wet paint. Their eyes were gone, just empty sockets, black as tar. Their mouths stretched open, jaws unhinged, grins splitting all the way to their ears. And then the light flickered. When the fluorescence steadied, the room was empty. The boardroom table was bare, the chairs tucked in neatly, papers gone, people gone. Not a sound, not a trace. I staggered back, my boot hitting a loose tile. The noise echoed through the silent halls. I swear I heard something answer, like footsteps, faint but quick, shuffling down the stairwell I'd just come from. Panic set in. I grabbed my cracked camera and ran the other way, down a corridor that led deeper into the offices. My flashlight beam jittered across walls lined with framed photos, smiling employees in lab coats, company picnics, safety award plaques. Except when I looked closer, the faces weren't right. Every photo had been altered, not with ink or scratches. No, this was baked into the images themselves. The eyes were smudged out. The smiles stretched too wide. Some of the faces had no features at all, just smooth skin where eyes and mouths should have been. I kept moving, faster, my breath ragged. The buzzing overhead grew louder, rising like a swarm of hornets. And then I realized it wasn't just buzzing. It was voices. Low, droning voices, whispering all at once, overlapping each other in a language I didn't know. I stumbled into another room, an office, smaller than the boardroom. A desk sat in the center, papers stacked neatly on top. I forced myself closer, hands trembling as I lifted one of the sheets. It was a log. Employee names, check-ins, dates, signatures. The most recent entry was yesterday. I dropped the paper like it burned me. Something moved in the corner of the room, a flicker of motion just at the edge of my vision. I swung my flashlight toward it. Nothing but a filing cabinet, drawers half open. I stepped closer, slow, cautious, then yanked one drawer shut. That's when I saw it, my reflection in the metal. Only, it wasn't mine. The face staring back was too pale, the eyes too dark, and the smile, God, that smile, stretched so far it cut into the cheeks. I staggered back, slamming into the desk. The reflection leaned closer, even though I hadn't moved. Its lips moved, whispering something I couldn't hear. The lights flickered again, and suddenly, I wasn't alone in that room. A hand landed on my shoulder, cold, firm. I turned, slow, shaking, expecting one of the figures from the boardroom, but there was no one there, just the office, just me. And yet, I could still feel the weight of that hand pressing down, even as the room went dead silent. That's when I realized I wasn't exploring anymore. I was being led, like they wanted me deeper inside. I should have left. I told myself that with every step I took deeper into the factory. But the strange thing is, I didn't feel scared anymore. I felt calm. The humming of the lights wasn't harsh now. It was soothing, almost musical. The air smelled clean, sterile, like a brand new office building. And in the distance, I could hear the faint rustle of papers, the soft clack of typewriter keys. I knew the plant had been dead for years, but in that moment, it felt alive again, like it had been waiting for me. I wandered back toward the boardroom. My flashlight batteries had died, but I didn't need them anymore. The halls weren't dark now. They glowed faintly, like the walls themselves were lit from within. When I reached the glass doors, the boardroom wasn't empty anymore. The 6 figures were back, seated neatly at the table. Their faces were wrong again, those 2 wide smiles, those dark, hollow eyes. But they didn't frighten me this time. They looked familiar, like co-workers I hadn't seen in years, like people I trusted. One of them stood and pulled out a chair. For me. I don't remember walking forward, but suddenly I was sitting at the table. My hands rested on the polished wood, and in front of me was a neat stack of papers. A contract, my name printed at the top, and beneath it, my signature. I laughed, a nervous, broken sound. "I never signed this," I whispered. The figure beside me leaned closer, its face blurred and stretched, but its voice was clear. "You did. You always have." The others nodded in unison. I looked down again, and that's when I noticed the ink on the page wasn't dry. It was wet, glistening, and it wasn't ink at all. It was red. I pulled my hand back and found my fingertips stained. Blood. The lights flickered, and for a moment I wasn't in a boardroom anymore. I was in the basement of the plant, surrounded by empty vats and rusted equipment. And there were bodies, dozens of them, strewn across the floor. Not fresh, not rotten, just husks. Skin stretched, faces smooth, all of them arranged neatly, like they'd been filed away. And in the center of them, all, was me. Or something that looked like me. It stood there, smiling too wide, eyes dark hollows, its camera dangling from its neck. My camera. The lights flickered again, and I was back in the boardroom, contract in front of me. I should have run, I should have screamed, but instead, I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. It moved smoothly, confidently, like it had done this 1,000 times before. I signed, and when I looked up, the 6 figures were smiling wider, their faces blurring into nothing but grins. I don't remember leaving the factory, but I know I did, because I'm here now, telling you this. The weird part? My photos from that night came out perfect. Crisp, clear, no blurs. Just 6 executives in suits, sitting around a table, smiling pleasantly. Everyone I show them to says the same thing. Looks like you fit right in. And sometimes when I catch my reflection in the lens, I see it too. Maybe Stenton Chemical never closed. Maybe it just needed new staff. And maybe I was always meant to be one of them. I've spent most of my adult life chasing ghosts of the past. Not literal ones, but the kind you find in archives, yellowed newspapers, brittle photographs. I write about local history for a regional journal. It doesn't pay much, but it gives me access to places most people never get to see. That's how I ended up at the old Briarford Brewery. The brewery shut down in 1952 after a fire gutted part of the main floor. Insurance fraud, people said. Others whispered about workers vanishing in the cellars. For decades it sat abandoned, windows bricked over, vines crawling up the brick walls. I was researching Prohibition-era smuggling when I learned that the brewery had kept extensive records. Ledgers, shipping manifests, even private correspondence. Supposedly, it was all still in the underground archives, sealed off after the fire. I convinced the property owner to let me inside for a heritage piece. He shrugged. Nobody else wanted anything to do with the place. From the moment I stepped in, the air felt wrong. Not just musty or stale, but thick, heavy, like I was stepping underwater. My flashlight beam caught dust swirling in the dark, but it didn't settle. It just hung there, suspended. The ground floor was gutted and blackened, beams charred and warped, but the stairs leading down into the archives were untouched. Smooth stone steps, cool to the touch. The deeper I went, the stronger the smell became. Not mildew, not smoke. Sweet, almost cloying, like fermenting fruit left too long. At the bottom, the archives stretched out in neat rows. Rusted shelves groaned under the weight of boxes. Ledgers lay open on tables, ink faded but legible. I brushed dust from one and read an entry dated 1928. Shipment received, 20 accounted for, 8 unfit, locked below. Locked below? I frowned, flipping pages, but most of the writing dissolved into water stains and smears. That's when I heard it. A door creaking somewhere deeper in the stacks. I froze, flashlight shaking. Rats, I told myself. Old wood settling. But then I heard footsteps, slow, careful, deliberate. "Hello," my voice cracked. "Is someone there?" No answer. I pushed deeper, weaving between shelves. My light caught a row of glass bottles, labels eaten away by time. Behind them, half hidden by shadows, was a wooden door I hadn't seen on any blueprint. Its iron hinges were streaked with rust, but the handle gleamed like it had been polished. Against my better judgment, I turned it. The door swung inward with a groan. Beyond was a narrow chamber, colder than the rest. My breath fogged instantly. The walls weren't brick or stone. They were lined with wood, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Circles, spirals, marks that seemed to writhe when I looked at them too long. And in the center of the room was a table. On it lay a single ledger, newer than the rest. Its pages weren't yellowed. They were crisp, white. I opened it. Inside was a list of names, column after column, stretching back decades, each with a date, some from the 1800s, some from last year. My stomach dropped when I turned to the final page. There was a fresh entry, the ink still glistened, and the name written there was mine. Seeing my own name in that ledger should have sent me running. Any sane person would have bolted up the stairs, out into the open air, and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I flipped the page, desperate to see more. My hands trembled so badly the paper rattled. Below my name was a blank line, waiting. The date beside mine was today's. I told myself it had to be a prank. Someone messing with me. Maybe the owner had slipped in wanting to spook the history guy. But the deeper I looked into the ledger, the less sense that theory made. The handwriting never changed. From the 1800s to the present day, every name, every date, it was all written in the same perfect hand. Ink, dark and fresh, no fading, no smudging. I slammed the book shut and stumbled back, my flashlight beam jittering across the carved walls. The symbols seemed to twist in the light, spirals spinning, lines bending into shapes that looked like faces. That's when I heard the whisper. It came from behind me, soft but clear. Accounted for. I spun, light cutting across the room, empty. Just shelves of records and dust swirling in the beam. My heart hammered. I bolted for the door, shoving it shut behind me. The sound echoed like a vault ceiling. I sprinted down the rows of shelves, aiming for the stairwell, but the stairs weren't there. I swear on my life, where the steps had been was just another wall of shelves, stacked high with ledgers. My flashlight beam caught spines stretching upward into shadow, taller than the ceiling should have allowed. I turned, stumbling down another row. Same thing. Shelves upon shelves, endless, repeating. The archives had shifted. No matter which way I ran, I found more shelves. Every ledger I pulled free had names inside, page after page, with the same hand, the same dates. My own appeared over and over, written in different decades, centuries apart. The whispers grew louder. Dozens of voices now, layered together. Some sharp, some guttural, some so faint I felt them more than heard them. They didn't say words I understood, but the cadence was the same. Roll call. Names being read. I clutched my flashlight like a weapon, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "I don't belong here," I shouted. "I'm not one of you." The whispers stopped. For a moment the silence was worse than the noise. Then the light in my hand dimmed, sputtered. In the dying glow, I saw shapes between the shelves, figures standing motionless, faces obscured by shadow. Too many to count. One stepped closer. I caught just enough of its face to see that it was human, or had been. Skin stretched tight, lips sewn shut with dark thread. But its eyes, God, its eyes were mine. The flashlight died completely, and the dark wasn't empty. I felt hands brush my arms, my shoulders, guiding me deeper. Dozens of hands, cold and steady, pulling me along. The whispers swelled again, this time right in my ear. "Keeper," they breathed. "Keeper, keeper." I tried to fight, but my body moved with them, like I'd been walking these halls for years. My chest heaved, my throat dry, but my feet carried me forward. Deeper into the labyrinth of shelves. And at the far end of the aisle, glowing faintly in the dark, I saw another table, another ledger, this one open to a blank page. Waiting. The table waited at the end of the aisle, its surface lit by some unseen glow. The ledger lay open, blank pages gleaming white as bone. My steps slowed, but I couldn't stop. The hands on my shoulders guided me forward, steady and patient. When I reached the table, the whispers ceased. The silence pressed down like a weight, thicker than the air itself. I stared at the ledger, throat dry, chest heaving. Then the pen appeared. It hadn't been there a moment ago. Just a quill of some kind, black as soot, its nib already glistening with ink. My hand shook as it rose, not because I willed it, but because something else did. The pen touched the page, and letters began to form. My name. Again. The same perfect handwriting, neat and steady, nothing like my own. The ink bled into the paper, but the letters never smeared. Once it finished, the whispers returned, soft, approving, satisfied. "Accounted for," they breathed. I stumbled back, but the table and ledger followed. No matter which way I turned, I was always at the table again, staring down at the same blank page, waiting for another name. The truth hit me like a hammer. I wasn't just a visitor. I wasn't trapped. I was inducted. The archives had claimed me. Hours, days, passed in a blur. I flipped through the pages, and there they were, names stretching back centuries. Some I recognized from old obituaries, others from stories buried in town lore, each name written in the same hand I now held. The pen moves for me now, smooth, automatic. I don't even think about it anymore. The ink never runs dry. Sometimes I hear new footsteps on the stairs above. The archives shift, the walls breathe, and another poor soul stumbles down here with a flashlight and questions. I always try to warn them. I whisper through the shelves, hoping they'll turn back. But they never do. The ledger is always waiting. I understand now why the pages keep going, why there's always a blank line ready. We're not archivists. We're bait. The records don't preserve history, they make it. Every new name written is another body accounted for, another keeper added to the cycle. And now, I'm part of it. The worst part? I don't feel fear anymore, not the way I used to. The whispers have settled in my bones, soft and constant like breathing. I know the symbols carved in the walls now. They aren't warnings. They're instructions. My job is simple. Keep the archives, call the roll, write the names, and wait for the next one. So if you're reading this, if you found my notes or my recorder, listen carefully. Don't come looking for the brewery. Don't try to find the archives, because once you step inside, your name's already in the book, and I'll be here, waiting to write it. I've worked in building maintenance most of my life. Warehouses, schools, old factories. If it's falling apart, someone has to fix it. Most of the time, it's boring work. Patch wiring, replace busted pipes, keep vandals from wrecking what's left. That's how I ended up at the old Wycombe assembly plant. The place had been shuttered since the early 80s, when the auto industry in our town tanked. 500,000 square feet of rusted machines, empty conveyor belts, and silence. The city wanted it inspected for repurposing, so my crew and I got the graveyard shift, 3 of us, working through the night. It was me, Frankie, and Jules. We'd worked together long enough to be more like brothers than co-workers. Frankie cracked jokes, Jules chain-smoked, and I kept the log. The first night, nothing weird happened, just shadows and echoes, the usual abandoned factory atmosphere. But on the second night, at exactly 3 a.m., the shift bell rang. You know the sound, I mean, the big brass alarm that tells workers to start or stop their shift. Loud, metallic, echoing through the whole damn plant. It hadn't rung in decades, but that night, it boomed so loud it rattled dust from the rafters. Frankie jumped a foot in the air, dropping his wrench. "The hell was that?" "Bell system's dead," Jules muttered, blowing smoke. "Ain't no power here." But there it was, clear as day. The shift bell. And then the machines started. The conveyor belts groaned, chains rattling, motors sparking to life. Hydraulic presses shuddered, gears grinding, pistons slamming. The whole plant roared like it had been waiting 40 years to wake up. We just stood there, frozen, watching dead machinery move like it was 1979 again. "Power's cut," I said, voice shaking. "There's no way." But then we heard something worse. Boots. The sound of hundreds of boots hitting the concrete floor in rhythm. Marching. Frankie's eyes went wide. "Nope. Hell no. I'm out." He bolted, tools clattering, disappearing into the shadows. Jules and I followed, hearts hammering. But the sound followed us, the tramp of boots, closer and closer, echoing down the corridors. We ducked into a side hall, pressing ourselves against the wall. My flashlight beam shook as I swept it across the catwalk above. That's when I saw them. Figures, dozens of them. Men in coveralls and helmets, walking in perfect formation. Their faces were wrong, gray, blurred, like half-formed masks. Their hands swung in unison, their eyes empty sockets that glowed faintly with dull red light. "Shift change," Jules whispered, voice trembling. The figures didn't look at us. They just kept walking, boots slamming in rhythm, heading toward the machines like nothing had ever happened. The presses slammed. The belts whirred. Sparks rained down like fireworks. And the shift bell rang again. This time it didn't stop. It rang and rang, louder and louder, until it felt like it was inside my skull. I dropped to my knees, clapping my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. When I looked up, Jules was gone. 1 second he was beside me, the next he'd vanished into the marching crowd, swallowed whole. "Jules!" I screamed, stumbling forward. But the figures didn't even slow. They kept moving, eyes fixed forward, boots pounding in time with the endless bell, and I swear I saw him then, Jules, his face pale, his eyes glowing red, marching with the rest, like he'd always belonged there. I tore through the factory floor screaming Jules's name, but the machines drowned me out. The presses slammed like thunder, conveyor belts rattled, sparks hissed and popped. The air stank of burnt oil and ozone, thick enough to make my eyes water. The figures marched past me, oblivious, boots pounding in perfect rhythm. Each time the bell clanged, their heads jerked in unison, like puppets on invisible strings. And there, in the middle of them, was Jules. He didn't fight, he didn't scream, he just walked, eyes glowing red, face slack. His cigarette still dangled from his lips, but it wasn't lit. He looked like a man clocking into work, like this was just another day. I shoved through the crowd, desperate to reach him. My shoulders slammed against cold bodies that gave way but didn't react. When I finally grabbed his arm, it was ice cold, stiff as stone. "Jules, it's me!" I shouted, shaking him. "Snap out of it!" For a second, he blinked. Just a second. His eyes flickered, red glow dimming. Mouth twitching like he wanted to speak. And then the bell rang again. He ripped free, face twisting back into that blank stare, and marched on. I stumbled, nearly trampled under the endless boots. Panic clawed at my chest. I swung my flashlight, trying to find Frankie. He had to be here somewhere. He'd bolted first. Maybe he'd made it out. But all I saw was more workers. Row after row of them, stretching into the shadows, their faces pale masks, their eyes burning. I bolted toward the stairwell, lungs heaving. The bell still rang, vibrating in my bones, but I forced myself up the rusted steps 2 at a time. At the top, I burst into an office overlooking the floor. From there, I saw it all. Hundreds of workers marching in circles, machines roaring like they'd never stopped. Sparks rained from the ceiling, smoke curled through the rafters, and the bell rang without pause. And in the middle of it all, Jules, still marching. I slammed the office door shut and pressed my back against it, chest heaving. My mind raced. This wasn't possible. There was no power, no workers, no way this place could run. It had been dead for 40 years, unless it hadn't. I staggered to the desk, searching for anything that could explain it. Most of the papers were rotted, eaten by mildew, but in one drawer, I found a logbook, edges crisp and blackened like it had been burned. The last entry was dated the night the factory closed. Bell malfunction. Would not stop ringing. Workers refused to leave. Claimed shift not over. Management ordered evacuation. Bell still ringing. I dropped the book, bile rising in my throat. Below, the marching grew louder. Boots slammed in unison, rattling the walls. The machines roared, pressing, grinding, like they were feeding on the rhythm. And then the bell changed. It wasn't just ringing anymore. It was calling my name. I heard it clearly, booming over the machines. "Michael! Michael! Michael!" I clamped my hands over my ears, screaming, "No! I'm not part of this!" But when I looked down at the floor again, I saw Jules staring up at me. His eyes glowed brighter than the rest, and for the first time, he smiled. Not the Jules I knew, not my friend, something else. And in that moment, I knew. I hadn't lost him. He'd been claimed. I don't know how long I stayed in that office, shaking and listening to the endless bell. Every clang rattled my bones, my teeth, my skull. The machines below pounded in rhythm, and the workers kept marching, and Jules kept staring up at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran. I bolted down the opposite stairwell, my boots clanging against rusted metal, each step echoing too loud. I didn't stop until I burst out into a corridor lined with lockers. The noise behind me didn't fade. It followed. The bell, the boots, the grinding machines. Louder with every step, like the whole factory was chasing me. I shoved through a door that should have led outside. Instead, it opened into another section of the floor. Rows of workers turned their heads in unison, eyes glowing, boots slamming as they shifted toward me. And at the front was Jules. He opened his mouth. The sound that came out wasn't his voice. It was the bell. Deafening, metallic, blasting from his chest. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. "Please, Jules, it's me!" For a moment, I thought I saw him again. The real him. Just a flicker in his eyes, a tremor in his lips, like he was trying to form words. But then the glow swallowed him again. Something inside me broke. I knew I couldn't save him. Not from this. Not from them. So I did the only thing I could. I ran. I don't remember how I found the exit. One moment I was surrounded by marching boots and glowing eyes. The next, I was stumbling out into the cold night air. My lungs burned, my vision swam. But I didn't stop running until the factory was a shadow on the horizon. The bell still rang behind me, faint but steady, echoing into the sky. I collapsed on the roadside, sobbing until sunrise. When I finally made it back to town, I told the supervisor I quit. I didn't give a reason. I didn't need to. My face said enough. But here's the thing. I made it out. I survived. Jules didn't. No one even noticed he was gone. Another homeless man vanished. Another maintenance worker who didn't show up. His name won't be in any papers. His face won't be on the news. The world doesn't care. But I care. And I know where he is. He's still in there, marching in rhythm, eyes glowing red, bell ringing from his chest. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. The clang of boots, the endless toll of the shift bell. It seeps through the walls, vibrating the floor beneath my bed. And I know it's him, calling me back. I survived that night, but at a cost I'll never repay, because Jules is gone, and I left him behind. People assume being a paranormal investigator is exciting. EVPs, shadow figures, evidence you can brag about online. Most of the time it's moldy basements, cold drafts, and hours of nothing. But every once in a while you walk into a place that feels wrong before you even unpack your gear. That was the old meatpacking plant on the edge of Millerton. Locals said it had been closed since the 70s, after a worker fell into one of the rendering vats and the company covered it up. Others whispered about people vanishing around the grounds, but no one ever proved anything. The place was massive. 5 floors of rust, broken windows, and machinery big enough to crush a car. I'd been hired by a podcast crew. They wanted authentic paranormal investigation audio for their Halloween special. I'd been to dozens of locations before, so I figured it would be the same old drill. Walk the site, set up recorders, pretend the creaks and groans were ghosts. But the moment I stepped through the main entrance, my stomach dropped. The air felt heavy, pressing down on my chest like I'd walked underwater. My camera lens fogged instantly, even though the building wasn't cold, and I couldn't shake the feeling that every broken window was an eye staring down at me. "Atmospheric as hell," the producer said, grinning as he panned his light across the factory floor. "This'll kill with listeners." I didn't smile. We set up base in the old break room. Rusted lockers lined the walls. A collapsed vending machine leaned in the corner. My recorder picked up the usual ambience, drips of water, distant creaks, the occasional rat. But then came the first whisper. It wasn't caught in the distance. It was right in my ear. Closer. I flinched, nearly dropping the recorder. My teammates thought I was reacting for the mic, playing it up. I didn't correct them. We split into pairs to cover more ground. I got assigned the upper catwalks, overlooking the slaughter line. My flashlight beam traced rusted hooks swaying on chains, each one squealing faintly. The smell hit me then, a mix of old grease and something sweeter, like rotting meat that had seeped into the walls. Halfway across the catwalk, I heard it. Bootsteps, not mine. They echoed in perfect rhythm just a few feet behind me. I stopped. The steps stopped. I swung my flashlight back. Nothing, just rust and shadows. When I turned forward again, every hook was swaying, not gently, violently, like invisible bodies were twisting on them. My recorder hissed with static, then cleared. A voice bled through. "We see you." The hair on the back of my neck stood straight. I bolted back to the break room, heart pounding. My teammates laughed when I told them what happened. "Classic," one said. "That'll sound great in post." But when we played the tape back, their faces drained of color. Because the voice wasn't just whispering, "We see you." It was whispering my name. We replayed the tape 3 times. Each time, my name came through clearer. Not distorted, not like pareidolia. You didn't have to strain to hear it. It was my name, whispered low and deliberate. The crew tried to laugh it off, but I saw the fear in their eyes. The producer finally said, "Could be a squatter messing with us, just keep rolling, we need the content." I wanted to leave. I should have left. But the investigator in me, the stubborn, prideful part, pushed me to keep going. We split up again. This time, I went down to the basement. The stairs groaned under my boots, each step sinking into darkness. The air grew heavier the deeper I went, damp and sour like spoiled meat. My flashlight beam jittered across pipes dripping condensation, the sound echoing like a steady heartbeat. At the bottom was the rendering floor. Vast vats loomed in the dark, rusted lids half open, ladders leading into their yawning mouths. Chains dangled from the ceiling, some still tipped with meat hooks. My recorder hissed again. A voice crackled through, low and broken. "Down here!" I almost turned back. But something about the voice. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded pleading. So I stepped forward. The floor was slick, the stench unbearable. My beam caught movement at the far end. Just a flicker, like a shadow darting behind a vat. My breath hitched. "Hello?" I called out. The reply came instantly. "Here." I froze, flashlight trembling. It wasn't coming from the far end. It was coming from the vat right beside me. I swung the light down, half expecting to see a squatter crouched inside. Instead, I saw handprints smeared along the rim, dozens of them, pressed into the rust, overlapping, stretching down the sides like people had tried to claw their way out. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the recorder. That's when the footsteps started again. Not one set, hundreds. Boots slamming against the concrete in perfect rhythm, marching through the factory above. The sound was deafening, shaking dust loose from the rafters. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was worse. I raised the recorder, my voice shaking. "Who are you?" Static. Then a single word. "Watched." The hooks above me began to sway. Slowly at first, then harder, clanging against each other like chimes in a storm. My flashlight beam swung across the basement and landed on the far wall. Eyes. Dozens of them. Not human eyes, not animal eyes. Just shapes in the wall itself, round and wet, glistening like they'd been carved from flesh and glass. And they were all staring at me. I backed away, breath ragged, whispering, "This isn't real! This isn't real!" But the thing about eyes is, they blink. And these did. Every single one blinked in unison. My legs gave out. I hit the floor hard. My recorder skidding across the concrete. The static spiked, filling my ears with a roar like a crowd breathing together. Then, through the noise, came the whisper again, clearer, Closer. We see you. My flashlight died, and in that darkness, I swear I felt dozens of gazes pin me to the floor, cold and unblinking, drilling into me until I thought my skull would crack. When I came to, I was back in the break room. My teammates swore they found me wandering the hallways, eyes glazed, recorder clutched to my chest. I couldn't explain how I got there, but on the tape, clear as day, you can hear me whispering over and over. Not help me, not get out, just, I see you too. I told the crew I was done. I didn't care about their podcast, their sponsors, or their Halloween special. I wanted out. My hands shook so bad I could barely pack my gear. They argued, of course, said we only had a few hours left, that we needed a big finale, but when they saw the look in my eyes, they backed off. We left just before dawn. The factory loomed behind us, its broken windows catching the first weak light. From a distance it looked empty, dead, but I knew better, because as I climbed into the van, I glanced back one last time and saw eyes staring at me from the windows. Not glowing, not dramatic, just watching. I didn't say anything. What was the point? The others hadn't seen what I had. Back home, I tried to forget. I wiped the audio, deleted the photos, boxed up my equipment. I told myself I was done with this line of work. But the factory didn't stay behind. The first night, I woke to the sound of boots pacing my hallway. Slow, steady, like someone making their rounds. My apartment smelled faintly of grease and spoiled meat. I searched every room, but nothing was there. The second night, the hooks started swaying. I don't mean in my apartment. There were no hooks. But in my head, clear as day, I heard them clanging against each other. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them swinging in the dark. On the third night, the whispers returned. Closer. I snapped awake, drenched in sweat, the recorder lying on my nightstand. I hadn't touched it since the factory, but it was on, red light blinking. When I played it back, I heard myself, my own voice, muttering in the dark. I see you too. I see you too. I don't remember saying it. Now, it doesn't matter if I'm home, in my car, in a crowded cafe. I feel it. The gaze. Dozens, maybe hundreds of eyes pressing against me, unblinking. Reflections in glass show more than just me. Shadows twitch when I'm not moving. I've tried sleeping with the lights on. Doesn't help. The eyes are brighter then, clearer. I can make out every detail, the slick surface, the wet blink. They don't vanish with daylight. I thought maybe moving would help, so I drove 2 towns over, checked into a motel, locked the door, and shoved towels under the cracks. For a while it worked. I almost convinced myself I'd left it behind. But at 3:17 a.m., the motel fire alarm went off, a shrill metallic clang that rattled the walls. It wasn't a fire alarm, it was the shift bell. And in the smoke-streaked mirror above the sink, I saw them again. Eyes. Not dozens this time, hundreds, filling the glass, pressing against it from the other side, and all of them locked on me. I smashed the mirror. Didn't matter. The shards kept watching. So here I am, writing this down, hoping someone reads it and understands. The factory isn't just haunted, it's alive. And once it notices you, it doesn't stop. I thought I was investigating it, recording it, exposing it. But now I know the truth. It was never about me seeing the factory. It was about the factory seeing me. And it still does. Even now. That's all for this episode, but the nightmares don't end here. Subscribe for daily horror stories, leave a like if you want more, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.